Greetings and salutations. This is Akirishin. By request, in this video I will be reviewing the North American F-86A Sabre fighter. This is a classic fighter in history. I remember growing up reading comic books about this aircraft. In fact, one of my favorite phrases, there was a comic book I read once involving this aircraft where the American pilot got shot down by a MiG, and when asked, well, how did you get shot down? His reply was, well, I zigged when I should have zagged. So I've kind of never forgotten that phrase. Yes, sometimes I zig when I should have zagged, but, such is life. Anyway, this aircraft, its weapons are 6 12.7 millimeter machine guns, and they have an enormous rate of fire, 1,200 rounds per minute. But as you can see, the damage per second is very low. They have a medium effective range. 600 meters is kind of, in the middle, I would say. And, one of the primary things that you need to know about this aircraft is that, the positive about these machine guns is that in the fast-moving environment of level 10, it's a lot easier to get rounds on the target. You're dealing with jets, they're very fast, and sometimes it can be difficult to get cannons on the target. With these machine guns, you will get rounds on the target. But you have just got to sit there and beat and beat and beat on the target to take it out. And that can be frustrating sometimes because, if you're in the middle of a melee, you may not be able to finish your target before other enemy aircraft are attacking you. So it's a strength and it's a weakness. I think overall these machine guns are underpowered for an aircraft at level 10. But to each their own. You may love that. I think that if you look at the German fighters, for example, the MEP-1101, you've got 4 20 millimeter cannons, and if you look there at the damage per second, now remember you had 80 damage per second on the machine guns, you've got 200 damage per second on these cannons. And while it's not 1,200 rate of fire, it is 700 rate of fire, which is very, very good, and an effective range of 200 more meters than the machine guns on the Sabre. So, now the negative, of course, for the German aircraft versus the Sabre is that the German fighter is not as maneuverable as the Sabre. As you can see, it has high maneuverability in horizontal turns. I believe that the German fighter has good maneuverability in horizontal turns. So, I guess that's the trade-off, but boy, it would be nice to have those 20 millimeter cannons on this aircraft. It would be a real beast if it had the 20 millimeter cannons, but it doesn't. So upgrades wise, I have gone with Control Surface Adjustment 4, which increases maneuverability in the turns by 3%. and lightweight airframe, which increases the maneuverability in all axes by 3%. I almost always go with those two choices on fighters. Now, you have a few options on the third slot. You could seek to try to maybe increase this aircraft's survivability by going with things like improved covering, which has a 20% decrease in chance of critical damage to wings and tail, and a plus 5% aircraft HP. That's a good skill. The self-sealing fuel tank, which reduces fire, is a good skill, a good upgrade to have. You could also choose to go with improved radiator, because this aircraft only has a 7-second boost, engine boost, so being able to get it back up to full boost as soon as possible can be helpful. I chose to go with the engine tuning for a 5% increase in engine power, to augment this aircraft's stated high airspeed and its acceleration. But again, if you went with another choice to maybe improve the aircraft's low survivability, I don't think that would be a bad choice either. In terms of ammunition, I have gone with the universal ammunition, which, because of the high rate of fire, you could go with high explosive incendiary, but you can see there's not a huge difference in the chance of fire between universal and high explosive incendiary, and you get the extra crit chance. So I'm not sure why one would go with high explosive incendiary, but it's an option. It's certainly an option. The good thing about getting fires on the target is, when they're not in your sights, they're still taking damage. This aircraft does have a vulnerable engine, so I have chosen to the automatic engine restarter consumable, and I have also gone with the first aid kit, just because when the pilot gets injured, it's very difficult to put rounds on the target, and I just want every chance I can to be sending rounds down range and making contact. I did go with the gold versions of those two consumables just because they start automatically, so I don't have to think about it so much. I can concentrate on flying. I chose the non-gold reinforced control surfaces, since that's a manual consumable anyway. Pilot skills wise, I have gone with Aerobatics Expert, which increases maneuverability in all axes by 2%. That goes well with our light airframe skill. And I have also chosen Aerodynamics Expert, which increases the effects of our lightweight airframe and our controlled surface adjustment consumables, or not consumables, but upgrades, increases their effects by 40% of the effect that they have. To further augment my choice with regard to engine tuning, I did go with Engine Guru 1, again just augmenting that engine thrust. So I kind of see that as being compatible with my choice of the engine tuning upgrade. Looking at the aircraft's description, you see it is very effective in intercepting aircraft at high altitude. The only thing I would say about that is you're a bit squishy, So a lot of the aircraft at high altitude are not squishy, and they have big cannons. So just keep that in mind as you head up to the nosebleed section to take on ME-262s and such. Taking a look at this aircraft's stats. Its optimum altitude is 2,800 meters, so that certainly is high altitude performing aircraft. If you take, for example, the ME-262, it's at 2,500 meters, so you can see that that's pretty significant. Its optimum airspeed is 525 kilometers per hour. I would describe that as medium in the airspeed department. Okay, so what we will do now is let's take a look at the paint schemes. This is summer that you're looking at right now, a winter, desert, and marine. I've got to say I'm thinking that the desert is probably the most attractive paint scheme on this aircraft. So we're going to go to World of Warplanes website now and look at their aircraft comparison tool, and we are going to compare other fighters at level 10, at tier 10, and see how the F-86A stacks up in the stats comparison department. So let's do that now. So here we are on World of Warplanes website using the compare aircraft feature. We have Snoopy up here in our browser who's watching our efforts here. And now remember that when you select these planes, you want the plane you're trying to compare, in this case the F-86A Sabre, you want to choose it last, which will put it in the first slot. Kind of backwards there. Choose last to get the first, but that's the way it works. You also want to go into each one of these aircraft and make sure that they have been fully customized or upgraded. Most tier 10s are fully upgraded anyway when you first get them, but there are some, like the Yak 30 had an upgrade, so you want to make sure you're putting each aircraft in the best light. Alright, so starting our comparison here, we have the Kai 162-3, a very maneuverable, effective aircraft, and the Supermarine Swift, a British aircraft. And just looking at the gun armament, you can see here that according to the stats, the F-86A Sabre does outclass the Kai 162-3 very slightly. However, it's significantly less powerful in the armament department than the Supermarine Swift. Now, the Swift has cannons, so that makes sense. It has the type of cannons I wish the F-86A Sabre does. Now, of course, you know, if you can't get rounds on the target with the cannons, it doesn't matter. But so I mean, that's the positive about the guns, as I mentioned, that the F-86A has. Survivability. This aircraft is actually more survivable than the Kai 162 or the Swift, which honestly is a bit of a surprise to me. But you can see here it shows that in the hit points for these respective aircraft. top speed at best altitude. So when these aircrafts are in their altitude element, the F-86A Sabre outperforms fairly significantly the Chi 162, but the Swift outperforms the F-86A in that department. Average turn time for 360 degrees, so when you're in that turning dogfight, which aircraft is going to prevail. And this is no surprise to me. The Chi 162-3 is a very maneuverable aircraft. So if you get in a dogfight, a turning dogfight with that aircraft, you're probably going to ultimately lose that entanglement. And the other thing with the Chi 162 that I've noticed is that they are able to slow down quite effectively. So you can sometimes, it's easy to go past them if you're not really paying attention. But the Swift, is not going to be able to hold its own with the F-86A in any type of turning fight. Optimum airspeed, the Chi is not as effective in that regard as the F-86A, whereas the Swift, of course, has a much stronger optimum airspeed. It's a fast fighter. In terms of the optimum altitude, the F-86A is the champ among these three fighters by a pretty large margin. Rate of climb, so I mean, if you're trying to get away from an enemy by heading up to the nosebleed section, you're going to be about even with the Chi. You're going to be, I mean, they have the same rate of climb, whereas the Swift, no surprise, is going to be better at climbing than the F-86A. All right, so what we'll do now is we will drop those two aircraft off our list and go on to the ME P1101 and the Focke-Wulf FW252. Now the ME P1101 has the cannons I wish the F-86A had. And you can see here that both the Messerschmitts significantly outgun the F-86A Sabre, and the cannons on both those aircraft are pretty decent in the rate of fire department. I mean, they're not 1,200 rounds per minute decent, but they're pretty decent. Survivability, it's the same for the 86A and the Focke-Wulf FW252, but the F-86A does have a slight advantage over the Messerschmitt. And you can see that there in the hit points as well. Top speed at best altitude, it is the same for the F-86A and the Focke-Wulf, but the F-86A beats out the Messerschmitt. Not by a huge margin, but significant enough. Now this is where the F-86A excels in comparison to the German fighters. Having flown both the P1101 and the FW252, both aircraft that I really enjoy flying, at the same time I know that those aircraft are not the best turning aircraft, and so if you get into a fight with those, with either the F-86A or maybe, for example, a Yak 30, you're going to lose that battle every time unless the other pilot makes a mistake. And you can see that the difference there in the F-86A versus those other two aircraft is significant. So, you know, the Messerschmitt and the Focke-Wulf 252, they could have the best cannons in the world, but if you can't put rounds on the F-86A in a turning dogfight, and that's the, you know, situation you find yourself in one of those German fighters, then, you know, it doesn't matter how strong your cannons are. Something to think about. Optimum airspeed, the German fighters outclass the F-86A in that regard, for sure. However, again, the F-86A is the altitude champ. And so, getting up there, high altitude, the F-86A is just a master of that. However, in terms of the climb rate, the German fighters certainly outpace the F-86A. So, a lot of times when you're going to high altitude, you're escaping something. And you can see that by a huge margin, the German aircraft are going to get up to whatever altitude they're best at much faster than the F-86A. So keep that in mind. If you're fleeing one of those German fighters in your F-86A, you're not going to make it if you're trying to outclimb them anyway. All right. So getting on to the Russian aircraft. Gun armament, again, no surprise, the F-86A is outclassed in that regard. The Russian fighters certainly have stronger armaments, especially the MiG has pretty strong cannons. Survivability, however, the F-86A is better in that department than either the Yak-30 or the MiG. A bit surprising, honestly. And you see that again, of course, in the hit points. Top speed at best altitude, the F-86A, fairly decent in excelling over the Yak-30, but the MiG slightly beats out the F-86A in that category. In terms of average time to make the 360-degree turn, and this is no surprise, the Yak-30 is a very, very good turning aircraft. And so no surprise that it beats the F-86A. You will be frustrated in an F-86A if you are trying to outturn a Yak-30 given similar upgrades and competent pilots in both aircraft. But the MiG is not as maneuverable as either the Yak or the F-86A. So, if you're in an F-86A and you're going up against a MiG, get in tight. If you're going up against a Yak, you want to try to take that Yak out before it can get close to you. Because if it gets close to you and you get in that turning fight, it's pretty much over at that point, unless the other pilot makes a mistake. Optimum airspeed, F-86A, somewhat better in that regard than the Yak-30, but the MiG excels over the F-86A. In terms of optimum altitude, the MiG is a high climber, so it is one of the few fighters that are up there in the 2,800 meter range. The Yak-30, of course, is a low to mid altitude fighter. And that's one of the things that can be frustrating in the Yak-30 is if you want to get up there, in the higher altitudes, you're not going to be able to do it. Your aircraft will stall out, and it won't be possible, and that can be very frustrating. And that's one of the benefits to an aircraft like the F-86A is you have the option. You have more options of where you can be, where you can escape to, where you can attack from. You have more options than the Yak-30. But if you get down low and you're going against the Yak-30, you've got to be extremely careful with that aircraft. Rate of climb, it's the same for the Yak-30 and the F-86A, but the MiG significantly excels over the F-86A in climb rate. So if you are trying to run from a MiG from low altitude to high altitude, forget it. It's going to catch you. So you might as well just stay down low and duke it out where you have the advantage over the MiG. Alright, let's get rid of those. And we have the Lavakin LA-15. Armaments-wise, the LA-15 has a slight advantage over the F-86A. Nothing significant, but some advantage. F-86A has a slight advantage in the survivability department over the LA-15. You can see that in the hit points. Top speed at best altitude is the same for both aircraft. Average turning time in the 360-degree fight, same for those two aircraft. Optimum altitude, this is again where F-86 significantly excels over the LA. And rate of climb is the same. So, you know, in many respects, these aircraft are very, very similar. But where the F-86A really shines in comparison to the LA-15 is the altitude performance by 800 meters, which is significant. All right, so I hope that helps you put into perspective the F-86A Sabre in comparison to other Tier 10 fighters. And hopefully that will help you choose which line of aircraft you want to prioritize. Okay, so what we're going to do now is head into a battle and let you see how this aircraft performs. So we have drawn the Road to Rome trap.
Attention, you are entering the zone controlled by the enemy.
We'll be headed to the command center first, and then on to the garrison over here.
You are approaching the front line. Off we go.
So this aircraft has a 7-second boost. Certainly not the longest, but not the 6 seconds that the Japanese aircraft get. You can see we can just hold down that trigger and we don't have to worry too much about overheating. Okay, so we're going to I think we'll try to stay low here and see if we can't come over here and surprise whatever is working on the garrison. I know there's an attack aircraft over here, or a lot of red. Folks, this is not going to go well. We are in the middle of a storm. And it takes us forever to kill anything. We have to beat on it. Just got the advantage there by flipping around. The only problem is we're going to have all kinds of things on our tail in about 1 or 2 seconds. I'm just trying to make some progress before they get us. Because I know they're going to get us. Well, at least we got one.
Bomber squadron detected. Engage them immediately.
Looks like the fight is over here at that garrison. We do have bombers that are incoming. And they're getting pretty close to our garrison, so we don't have long. Let's see if we can't help take some of these out. When you're in this aircraft, it's important to stay on the peripheral of the bombing group so that you're not taking fire from all the bombers at the same time. Unfortunately, we didn't get there in time.
The command centers are under our control. Communication with the headquarters established.
You can see how much we have to chew on things to kill anything. If this aircraft had the 20mm cannons that say that some of the German Messerschmitt fighters have, it would be very powerful, very strong aircraft. But I think with the machine guns the way they are, while they put out a tremendous amount of fire, it just takes forever to get anything done. And in the meantime, if you're in a swarm, you know, which obviously you want to try not to be, but here. So we're just trying to see if we can get that J7 to fly past us. Hopefully he'll come around here. Ah, we've lost some maneuverability. That's why the aircraft feels so sluggish right now. We've got our tail shot up. And we have something on our tail here. Wow. Our wings are just shot to hell. All we can do is just try to use our ground here to survive, but I don't think we're going to make it. Whew. Folks, we are on death's door here. Yep. Okay, so we've got some action here at our command center over here, but wow, our team has really chosen to go far away from our spawn points.
Support will not be available.
We really need to capture these spawn points that are closer to us so that we can more easily defend them. So if you want to flip over fast, probably vertically is the best way to do it. Although this aircraft is supposed to be very good in the horizontal turns, I find that flipping over vertically can sometimes be preferable.
center. Don't let them gain a foothold. Victory is in sight. Keep it up.
Okay, so we're making some progress here. Almost got it.
Attention all fighters. Enemy
Looks
bombers
like we have a
detected.
ground attack
Destroy
aircraft coming in.
them.
Let's see if we can knock it out before things are done. No boost left though. There we go. Goodbye. And looks like we have another ground attack aircraft. The man with the plan.
Great job today. We'll be waiting for you back home.
Alright, so let's see, we got effective fire, subjugator, #1 rank, and our grade 3 fighter result. Looks like I think we killed 3 aerial targets. I'm sorry, 11 aerial targets. Head back to the hangar here and check out the after action report. So that was a bit of a close one, but pulled it out. So yes, we killed, destroyed 11 aerial targets, 2 while defending. Over 6,000 combat points. And of course, helped to secure the win. So, kind of to summarize this aircraft, it's very maneuverable. The engine boost is meh, could be a little longer. 7 seconds, okay, but nothing stellar there. The guns are a little overwhelming, or not overwhelming, I should say. The guns are a little underwhelming. You know, it's nice to be able to hold down that trigger and not have to worry about the guns overheating, but it just takes forever to kill anything. I mean, even some of the fighters, the air defense fighters, as lightly armored as they were, it seemed to take forever to take them out. And I think that this aircraft would greatly benefit from some stronger cannons. But you know, of course, they're not going to put cannons on this aircraft. It is what it is. But just, you know, if you're grinding for this aircraft, just know that this is what you're going to deal with when you get it. And as long as you know that going into it, then you'll at least know what to expect. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you fly this aircraft, as you can see, you can have success in it. It's certainly not a bad fighter to get, but I think there are better ones out there. That would be my conclusion on that. But of course, you have to make up your own mind based on your individual play style. The good thing about these guns is that you have so many fast-moving targets, especially when you get up towards level 10, that sometimes it's hard to hit things with the cannons because they're just they're not in any they're not in your firing zone for very long. So having the 1200 rounds per minute machine guns you're going to get rounds on the target. That you can have a sense of confidence in. So that's the positive. But you're gonna beat on things for a while to take them down. I think that this aircraft could be one of the fighters that benefits from having the high explosive incendiary. But I mean, even the universal ammunition is only one dot less than the high explosive incendiary in the chance of fire category. So, who's to say? Well, again, thank you for watching this video.